All right, well, good morning, One Church. As always, super excited to have you. I hope you guys had a fantastic holiday, a great new year. You guys are feeling rested and ready to tackle 2022. But if you're not, we're here to encourage you. We're here to love you a little bit. And as a community, we are here to praise our God who so much so deserves it. So, again, thank you for being with us, whether you're here or online. But let's begin as we always do by standing and giving our God just a little bit of praise. He's coming on the clouds. He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break. His broken hearts declare his praise. But who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion, the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before him. Oh. Open the gates. Open up the gates. Make way before the King of Kings. darkness fades. Now the darkness fades into new beginnings as we lift our eyes to a hope beyond. Our creation waits with an expectation to declare the reign of the Lord our God. And we will not be moved when the earth gives way, for the risen one is overcome. And for every fear, there's an empty grave, for the risen one is overcome. And now the silence breaks in the name of Jesus. As the heavens cry, let the earth respond. Our creation shouts with a voice of triumph to declare the reign of the Lord our God. And we will not be moved when the earth gives way, for the risen one is overcome. And for every fear, there's an empty grave, for the risen one is overcome. And he shall reign forever. And he shall reign forever. Strongholds now surrender, for the Lord our God has overcome. Who can be against us? Jesus, our defender. He is the Lord, and he has overcome. He shall reign forever. Strongholds now surrender, for the Lord our God has overcome. Who can be against us? Jesus, our defender. He is the Lord, and he has overcome. 'Cause we will not be moved when the earth gives way, for the risen one is overcome. Yes, he has. And for every fear, there's an empty grave, for the risen one is overcome. We will not be moved when the earth gives way, for the risen one is overcome. And for every fear, there's an empty grave, for the risen one is overcome. Whoa. Thank you guys so much. You can have a seat.
All right. Well, hey, good morning. How you guys doing? Good. You guys survived the holidays. Good job. It's a new year. Good job. I have no idea what's going to happen this year, so we'll find out. But it's good to see you guys. Thanks for gathering. For the first time we've gathered in person since the new year hit. If you're online, Facebook or YouTube, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to make One Church a part of your day. And I'm excited to gather. A couple of things for us as we kick off this Sunday, this new series today. One is if you're a guest with us, you're watching online for the first time, checking us out, or maybe here in person, welcome. I really hope that this is an encouragement to you today, a blessing for you today as we help people look to know and follow Jesus. If you're in person, I want to invite you to something we call 1 in 5 right after the service. If you're new, back of the room by the orange banner, meet me there. I'll give you a 5-minute overview of who we are as a church. If you have any questions, a great chance to have them answer at that point. If you're online, our online host Nicole today, she's hanging out with you. So make sure you say hi to her. She's posting an online connect card to the comment section of Facebook or YouTube right now. click that link, fill out the little bit of information we need. I'll follow up with you this week with an email, just more about who we are and why we do this thing called One Church and why we live out this mission to work as one to help people follow Jesus. Another thing is we can worship God in a number of ways. One of those ways is giving back financially. We do that every week as a church and encourage people to do that as an act of worship, as a way to give thanks to God for how he's blessed us. You can do that with cash or check in the blue box in the back of the room, or anybody can go to onechurchpgh.com/giving. That's a safe and secure way you can give there as well. But today we are kicking off a brand new series about this guy named Joseph. And I've wanted to do a series like this for a long time, probably since we started One Church. And so finally, it just kind of fit, I think, in the right spot. I'm excited to kick this off today. And so we're going to do that here in a moment. But I'm going to invite you guys first to say hi to somebody around you, introduce yourself. Here's the question. Two things. Make sure you grab communion, because we're going to do that right after my message if you haven't done so. But here's the question today. We're talking about like dreams a little bit today. So what was a dream you had as a kid? Like, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Like, what was that goal that you had? So share that with somebody around you. What did you want to be when you were going to grow up? And then in a moment, I'll bring us back together. We'll kick off this series together this morning. Right. You guys can grab a seat. So, we all had dreams growing up, things we wanted to do. And, you know, it's a new year. A New Year's always a good time for new dreams, right? Like, anyone make any New Year's resolutions this year? A few? Anyone break them yet? Good job. Okay. I also think like, the past 2 years have just like eliminated resolutions. Like we have no idea what's going to take place, so let's just give up on any idea of resolutions. But yeah, so New Year's comes with new dreams, new hopes. We had those dreams and hopes as kids. But the last 2 years, if it taught us anything, is we have no idea what's coming, and so dreams often can turn quickly into nightmares. We don't know what this new year is going to bring, but we can rest on this truth, okay? The truth is this. It's a new year, but it's the same God. It's a new year, but it's the same Jesus. And so no matter what we go into this year, no matter what we've even come from this past year, we can rest on this truth that God is the same, Jesus is the same, and those truths that lie within them are always going to give us that hope and security that we need. My grandma lived this out so well. She was a woman who went through some crazy stuff, including some very brutal cancer that eventually took her life. But she always had this saying, and maybe you've heard this, and maybe you say it yourself, like, God is on the throne. She always would say this as a reminder that no matter what is going on in the world around us, God is there, God is in charge, and God is going to anchor us and give us that hope, even in the midst of nightmares going on. And this is the truth of how I want us to start our year off together as a church today. If you're here in person or watching online, this is the truth I really want us to start digging into with this new series by looking at this crazy story of this man named Joseph. Because here's the deal. I have no idea what your lives will look like moving forward. I don't have that gift of prophecy to say, you know what, this is what's going to happen in your life. It could be a number of options, but what I want us to do is I want us to be able to trust God no matter what's going to happen moving forward as a church, to see that we can live out God's dream for our lives even in the midst of nightmares. And this is why we're doing this Joseph series. And the little subtitle, Living the Dream in the Middle of the Nightmare, this was his story to its core. If we go back to our Turn the Page series that we did for the last quarter of the year in 2021, we went through different sections of the Bible and kind of looked at the big picture of the Bible. Joseph's story comes in the middle of the patriarch section, which is like the second major section of the Bible, where God was raising up these guys to start fulfilling his plan and his dream to rescue and restore people back to him through Jesus. And when we talked about the patriarch section, we didn't really talk about Joseph. He was there a little bit in our reading plan if you were doing that throughout the week, but we didn't talk much about him, and his story is vital. And the reason we didn't, we were going to come back to him here at this story. So what we're going to do is look at this story of Joseph. We wanted to come back to him because there is a ton going on in the story of Joseph. There is a dysfunctional family. There is jealousy. There is lies. There's cover-up. There's temptation. There's injustice. There's crazy dreams all throughout it. It's a crazy, wild story. But in this story, we see Joseph living this crazy life, but we see a life where God is constantly at work in him and through him. And we're going to see through his life, hopefully it's going to give us hope and faith that God does the same for you and me. And ultimately what we're going to start exploring today is this, is how does God work in the midst of things going bad? Because life goes bad for us sometimes. Now, to set up the story, here's how we're looking at it. Joseph, he was one of 12 sons, and his father was Jacob. And if you remember, we talked about this a lot in our Turn the Page series, Jacob and Esau, the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob, the father in all this situation, he came from a very dysfunctional family. His family was messed up. And as often these things happen, Jacob came from a dysfunctional family, and then he raised a dysfunctional family. It's just what happens sometimes. There's this generational dysfunction that takes place. Generational sin is a very real deal. Jacob kept that dysfunctional tradition alive. And one of the reasons Jacob's family was dysfunctional with his 12 sons, he had some daughters as well, including one of his sons, Joseph, was this: he favored Joseph above the rest of his kids. And we see this in Genesis 37, verse 3, where the writer writes, "Now Israel, which is another name for Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him." And so Jacob favored Joseph for a few reasons. One, he was born of an old age. One thing we don't see in the scriptures here, but Jacob had multiple wives, and the wife that Joseph was born from is Rachel, which was like his favorite wife. So it came from his favorite wife. It just became one of his favorite kids. It was his second youngest kid. He was born at an old age. There's a younger son named Benjamin that came after Joseph. But Joseph maybe just had this special connection with Jacob. However it was, Joseph became the favorite. And to show that, what he did is Jacob gave Joseph this ornate robe. And that robe, based off the translations, it was maybe multicolored. Anyone ever watch or experience Joseph with the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? Yeah. So kind of based off that story. Another translation is this robe was very long, and a long robe kind of signified prominence. And so whatever this robe looked like, either way, it stood out amongst the rest of the siblings and what they had. Joseph got this robe. It was made specially for him and given to him. And it was very obvious to the other siblings that Joseph was favored by Jacob. It was clear. And this had a great impact on the family. For one, his brothers hated him for it. Verse 4 says, "When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any other of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him." They couldn't even tolerate him. They hated him. And what happens is when favoritism shows up, and maybe you've experienced this before. When favoritism shows up, it puts tension and disdain on relationships. Do you ever feel like the other sibling was the favorite in your life? Or maybe you ever feel like the coworker got more favoritism from the boss than you, or a teammate got more playing time than you because there was a favorites with the coach and things like that. What did that do to you? It probably created some jealousy, some frustration. It probably created some strain on that relationship with those around you. It's what takes place. This happened in my family this week. One of Noah's Christmas gifts, because the shipping was crazy this year for Christmas, didn't come in time, and it came in this week. And I think he's wearing a hoodie over top of it, but pray for me, he's wearing a Joe Burrow jersey now. So, yeah. So I don't know if this is like, a reflection of my parenting or my sin or failure. I'm not sure. But anyways, Noah is rocking. He loves Joe Burrow. He likes the Bengals now. I don't know. It is what it is. We let all people in here. It's all good. So, but Noah's rocking that Joe Burrow jersey, and he got that jersey in this week. And so he wore it to school. He's wearing it today. He's probably going to wear it every single day he can this week. But when Kobe, our youngest, saw that Noah got this other present, he started freaking out. He's like, this is not fair. And we're like, Kobe, what is the problem? He's like, Noah got more presents than me. And Kobe's just all angry. And we call Kobe the Hulk for a reason, and the Hulk was coming out in this moment. He was all angry, and we had to explain to him, like, Kobe, no, listen, Noah did not get more presents than you. His present just didn't come in on time. Remember, he opened up on Christmas a piece of paper with a picture of the jersey on it? That was his present. It just finally came in now. We had to explain to him to calm him down because Kobe sensed favoritism. He sensed that we were treating Noah differently than we were treating him, and he was not going to have that. He was mad at us. He was mad at Noah. This is what favoritism does. And this is what happened with Jacob and Joseph and the relationship with the rest of the siblings. The youngest one, Benjamin's pretty innocent in this whole story. But Joseph and his 10 older siblings, there's a tension there because Jacob tended to favor Joseph. So that sets up this family dysfunction, if you're following with me now. And then on top of that, Joseph was this dreamer. Joseph was a dreamer. He was favored by his father, but God also showed some favoritism to Joseph because God was going to use Joseph for amazing things. And it started with some dreams. Joseph's this dream. And the first dream was this. He and his brothers were out in a field, binding sheaves of grain. And all of a sudden, in the midst of this dream, Joseph's sheaf stood upright, and his brother's sheaves of grain were bowing down to his sheaf of grain. Basically saying his brothers are going to bow down to him one day. And so Joseph did what every sibling does. He tells his brothers that he has this dream. And this is what his brothers say in verse 8. They said, his brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Now, they don't realize this. This wasn't just a selfish dream by Joseph. This was a dream given to him by God. Joseph probably should have kept his mouth shut and not told his brothers this dream, but he did. And then he has a second dream. And the same thing, he told his brothers and his parents too. In this dream, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to him. So it's not just his siblings bowing down to him. Now it's his mom and dad bowing down to him as well. And he tells his whole family, hey guys, check out the dream I just had. This is number 2. And so he tells him that. And he even told his dad, and this is how his dad even reacted, verses 10 and 11. He says, when he had told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So his father rebukes him, kind of like Joseph, chill, man. Like, this is not a smart move. You shouldn't be telling us that. Do you really think that we're all going to bow down to you? His brothers get even more jealous, which makes them hate Joseph even more. But Jacob, the father, he kept this idea in mind. Sure, he rebuked his son, but he also kind of put in the back of his mind, maybe there'll be something to this. Maybe there's something to this dreams that Joseph keeps having, because God would often work in dreams at that time frame. And so what they didn't realize yet, though, is that these dreams were not of a spoiled brat. See, Joseph, when we look at this, we could almost look at this story and go, like, Joseph, like, is the favored kid. And when the favored kid knows their favorite, like, they kind of get cocky, a little arrogant. They know they can get away with anything. I don't sense that from Joseph when I read his story. I think Joseph's heart was actually pretty pure, which is why God chose to use him for the plan he was going to work out in this situation. Joseph had these dreams because God gave them to him. And so Joseph told these stories almost in a sense of like, hey, I'm having these dreams, Something's going to happen here, but the ones listening to the dreams, they didn't want to hear the idea that they'd be bowing down to Joseph. And so these dreams are coming from God, and we're going to see how that works out in this series, but still it created a lot of jealousy and hatred with his older brothers, because then the dream turns into a nightmare. Joseph has these dreams. Life is good for him. He's the favorite son. He has a nice robe. He's going to rule over his family one day. But in one situation, the older siblings are out tending the flock of their family, because that was how they had wealth back then. It was based off what they had. And they had farming land. They had flocks of sheep. And so the older brothers are out tending the flock one day, and Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers. Now, I have no idea why Joseph wasn't there also helping to take care of the flock. Maybe because he was the favorite and he got to just stay home with mom and dad duty once in the air conditioning and play video games. Like, he was doing whatever he wanted, and Jacob's like, hey, go check on your brothers. And so Joseph goes out to go check on his older brothers. Like, imagine your youngest sibling essentially being in charge of you. Like, hey, you guys doing your job, taking care of the sheep? This is what Joseph's doing in this situation. And so Jacob probably shouldn't have kept Joseph back. He also probably should not have sent Joseph to be the one checking on the older siblings, but this is what Jacob does because he's a dysfunctional father. It happens sometimes. And so he sends Joseph out to find his brothers, and as Joseph approaches, this happens. Verse 19, here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Now, sometimes we can lose emotion when we read Scripture. Like, they can just seem like words on the page, but I feel like when we read this, here comes that dreamer. Do you think that was like a fun, here comes that dreamer? Now, we can feel the hatred in these words right now. Like, here comes that dreamer. The one who thinks that we're going to bow down to him. The favorite son of our father who gets the special robes and all the privileges. He's the one having these dreams that we're going to bow down to him. Here comes the dreamer who's making our lives miserable. Miserable. So they do what typical older brothers do. They start plotting against him. But they start plotting against them to kill him. Now listen, I had younger brothers. I plotted against them in many ways. I promise you, I've never planned to kill them. If it happened in the midst of something we were doing, that's a risk we were willing to take. But listen, there was never purposely going, I'm going to kill my brothers, okay? This is what they're doing though. The older brother's like, you know what? I'm so sick of this. Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. Let's be done with this. So they start plotting a way to kill him. They're going to throw him in a cistern, kill him, create a cover-up story. They're going to take his robe and dip it in blood to make it look like an animal ate him and give it back to the father. They have this whole thing plotted out. This is going to be a flawless plan. It's kind of demented if you think about it. But they're planning out this process to kill him. And one brother, thankfully, Reuben, one brother, is kind of a good brother in the situation. He's like, no, we can't kill him. Dad would kill us. Let's not do this. Let's just his plan was to put him in a cistern, but then come rescue him later and bring the favored son back to the family, all that kind of stuff. So they put him in a cistern, and Reuben's like, okay, my plan's happening. He has to leave for a moment. But as they're waiting for Reuben to come back and all this stuff, as they're waiting, this group of Ishmaelites, this caravan of Ishmaelites starts coming through. And in that day, the practice of buying and selling slaves was pretty prominent. And so the other brothers started thinking, why kill him? We get nothing for that. What if we can make some money off of our brother and get rid of him? So they sell him as a slave to this caravan of Ishmaelites. Now they get some money, they get rid of their brother, and it's a win-win for them. And then they still have to figure out how to cover it up. So that Reuben comes back and realizes that they sold their brother to slavery. And they're like, what are we going to do? And that's when they took the robe, they dipped it in animal's blood, and they gave it to Jacob. And Jacob is convinced at this point that Joseph has been killed by some ferocious animal. So he's mourning, the family is broken. And it even says in scriptures that the brothers came around and to their father and started comforting him. Oh, Dad, it's awful that Joseph's dead now. Those fools sold him into slavery. They know he's alive, but this is the story they're going to play out to their dad. And everything is an absolute mess. Joseph now is a slave. He eventually gets sold again by the Ishmaelites to a man named Potiphar, but we're going to stop the story there, and next week we'll continue the story there. We want to land here today. But Joseph's dream is now a nightmare. The favorite son with these dreams, the robe, all this stuff laying before him. And now it doesn't seem like a reality. It doesn't even seem possible. Now he's living this nightmare. Things went bad for Joseph in a hurry. One moment he's living his great life. The next moment he's sold into slavery by his own siblings. There's no more father to favor him. The dream seems impossible now. But we're going to see both today and the rest of this series over the next 5-6 weeks is that God is going to continue to do some big work even in the midst of nightmares. That God is still going to get us to Jesus because Joseph's story is a major moment to eventually get us to Jesus. And no nightmare is ever going to stop God's dreams. And this is where I want us to land for this first week. We need to see that sometimes our dreams, our hopes for our lives can feel like a nightmare. That sometimes things go bad. And I think when we think about that in our own lives, we can easily find ourselves in this story with Joseph and his family. Sometimes we're like Joseph, and we all have dreams. Like we had dreams growing up. We wanted to be something when we grew up. Like I wanted to be a marine biologist, and now I'm a pastor. So I don't know what happened in there, but things change. Other of you, like you had dreams. Maybe you're living out your dreams, but we had dreams, things we want to do and achieve in our lives, a picture of how we want our lives to look. This is why we do things like New Year's resolutions, because we want these hopes and these dreams to come true for us. We want to work towards this goal of what we want our lives to look like. We want to, get healthier in the new year and all that kind of stuff. And then Giant Eagle gives us 4 dozens of donuts instead of 2 like they normally do. So there's extra donuts on there. Please go eat them. So maybe you'll break your resolution already this morning. But we have these hopes and dreams. And sometimes they can be like real dreams that we have while we're sleeping. And God, we have these dreams of what we want to see our lives to be. But often these dreams that you and I have, they're just a picture and a desire of what we want for our lives. We have dreams. But here's a very important difference I want us all to understand today. There is a difference in a dream that we have for ourselves and a dream that God gives us. There's a difference. God still gives his people dreams today. Sometimes real dreams, but sometimes it's just like this picture of what we want to see have to take place in life. And the truth is we also give ourselves dreams. Now, to be clear, the dreams that you have for yourself, they aren't necessarily bad. Like maybe you have these goals and plans for life and they're your dreams and they're centered around you. And I'm not here to say that they're necessarily bad, but we have to pay attention to one thing. When it comes to the dreams of our lives and what we want our lives to look like, who's the center of your dream? Is God the center of it, or are you? See, Joseph's dreams, they almost seem like he's the center of it. It's his siblings and his parents bowing down to him. But we're going to see that actually wasn't the case. He wasn't looking to be someone who rules over his siblings. That was not the heart he had. God gave him these dreams because God was going to use him to do amazing things to actually eventually get us to Jesus. But who's at the center of your dream? Is it you or is it God? Because the God-given dreams, the one that God gives us, is a dream that looks to glorify God and build his kingdom on earth. And I want to ask you this. What dream has God given you to do that? What dream has God given you to give him glory in life and build his kingdom here on earth? What dream has he given you for the opportunity to love the people around you, to serve people around you, to build people up around you? What dream has God given you to help point people to him? Because that's a God-given dream. And here's the deal. You don't need to be a pastor to live out that God-given dream. You can be doing exactly what you're doing right now in your life, and God is still giving you this dream in this moment to do something that's going to point other people to him. It's going to do something to allow you to live your life in a way that gives him glory with no matter what you're doing. What dream has God given you to do that? I'm not here to negate your own personal dreams, but I'm here to elevate the dreams that God wants to give you in your life. Because here's what I know. The more I talk to people, especially as we follow Jesus together, we start getting like these ideas, call them dreams, of how we can serve God better, of how we can make our communities better, of how we can love people better, of how we can, really reflect the glory of God. I think back to when we did Treat Your Street at Halloween, where we're like, we could, have a bunch of people come to our building, or we could just, where we live, love our neighbors. And that came from a dream that me and another person here at one church were having over dinner one time. We're like, hey, how do we better love people in the name of Jesus? And through that conversation, this dream kind of came out like, how do we just use Halloween as a way to just love our neighbors as ourselves? I really do feel like that was a God-given dream. I think one church is a God-given dream, but I also think the things that you do in your life, your professions can easily be God-given dreams. Your families can be God-given dreams where God's giving you these opportunities to point people to him. So what dream has God given you to do that? What are those things that you start thinking about, like, how can I best serve and honor and glorify God with what I'm doing in my life? What are those things? Because they're there. And usually you can identify them if God is at the center of it all. So what are they? And I encourage you to do this, recognize this with Joseph's story. Be careful who you tell those dreams to. Because people will let you down when it comes to the dreams that you have. Part of what got Joseph in his mess was telling the wrong people. And others can do that to us as well. Listen, I love people, but we also suck sometimes. Like, let's just be honest. Like, we have a tendency to just, like, mess things up. And one of the things we do, whether unintentionally or not, is we can really get in the way of the God-given dreams that people have. I think about this. When I made a decision to go into ministry full time, that wasn't my original plan. I actually went to Penn State Barron for a year. I was going to do other stuff that was not going to go well for me. But then I felt like God was saying, this is my path I want you to take, is to go into ministry. And I remember the idea of telling people was kind of scary for me, but what was awesome is pretty much everyone was crazy encouraging to me about this idea of going into ministry, except for one person. You guys remember like AOL Instant Messenger? If you're younger, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But anyways, it was like texting on a computer, essentially. But I remember I was sitting on my computer at school one day, and this guy I knew messaged me and said, hey, I think you're making a really bad decision to go into ministry. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, I think this is a horrible move. I think you're not going to make much money. I don't think it's a good career move for you. I think you're being young and stupid. And I'm like, okay then. Now, granted, 99% of all other people's reactions was positive about this, but there's one negative one, and can you guess which comment I focused the most on after that point? It was the one negative one. Because this is what we do as people. We get in the way of what God's calling us to do. But if God gives you a dream, and it's something I've learned with my life, with one church, if God gives you a dream, he will do two things. He will guide it, and he will guard it. And that's a very big deal for you to recognize, is when God's giving you something to do, a dream to live out, if it's from God, he's going to guide you in that, and he's going to guard that dream for you. And this is what he does with Joseph. But make sure it's God's dream for you. If you're the center of the dream, it's probably not God's dream. The dreams that you have for your life and your families and your jobs and your careers, all those things that you're doing, it should help point people to God and look to serve those around you. If it's not looking to do those things, it's probably not a God-centered dream. This is what we have to recognize when we can find ourselves like Joseph. We also can do this in this story. And we don't like this, but sometimes we can be like the brothers. Now, no one wants to admit that we're the bad guy in the story. We can be. Often we can be like the brothers in people's lives. We can criticize and we can kill people's dreams. We project our brokenness on other people, because here's the main problem with the brothers. The dreams from Joseph were not the issue here. The issue here with all the other older siblings, they had a broken life from a broken and unhealthy relationship with their father and their brother Joseph. And instead of dealing with that, they let that hurt and that jealousy and that brokenness, reflect onto their relationship with Joseph and end up hurting him in the process. So here's something I want to encourage you guys to do, is deal with your hurts. Every one of us has brokenness in our lives. We've got something going on from past experiences, maybe with jobs or family or church and religion or whatever it may be. And when that brokenness in us doesn't get taken care of, we can easily project it onto others and hurt them in the process. There's a saying that goes, hurt people hurt people. That's what we do. And so whatever is going on, I want to encourage you that if there's brokenness in your life, and the truth is it's there for all of us, is deal with it. Now, I'm not saying that in a way of like, just get over it. I'm saying in a healthy way, start working through it. If that means seeing a counselor, do that. If that means seeking out your relationship with God more and more, do that. If that means addressing the issue with the person who gave you that hurt, do that. If that means giving forgiveness to release that tension and brokenness from you, do that. But whatever it is, we need to start working through the hurts that we have in our lives. Because if not, we easily can be like the brothers in this story to Joseph. See, the truth is we need to be a people who helps God-given dreams become reality. I think of that for one church. Like, listen, we went to start this thing. This thing would not exist. We would not be here right now if it wasn't for other people and other churches saying, you know what? We're not going to get in the way of this. We're going to help one church become a reality. We're going to help by sending people. We're going to help by jumping in with this thing. We're going to give financially. We're going to pray about it. Like, there are so many people. The list of names is countless of those who said, you know what? We're going to be people that helps one church become a reality. That's what we should be as followers of Jesus, that when people have God-given dreams, we should help those things become real. So that's how we can find ourselves in this story. But here's what I ultimately want us to look at today. No matter where we're at, ultimately, just because God gives the dream, it doesn't mean it's going to go smoothly. Like, we're never promised that. We're never promised a smooth and easy life. And one of the biggest problems we have is we put our hope into a promise that God never gave. Like, oftentimes our relationship with God gets broken because we expect everything to go perfectly and smoothly with God and in our lives. But then when it doesn't happen, we're kind of like, what the heck, God? Where are you at on this situation? But God never promised that. God never promised that things would go smoothly. Sometimes what happens is generational dysfunction gets in the way. How many of you guys come from messed up families? Cool, just me? No, a bunch of us do. It's what we do. How many of us, if we come from that messed up family we came from overflows into our lives now? That gets in the way. It doesn't make life go smoothly. How many times feel like there have been people that have hurt you and broken your lives along the way? Do we recognize that we also live in a very broken and wicked world? When you look at Joseph's story, that was his story. Like, his family was messed up. People got in the way in the form of his jealous brothers. He was sold into slavery because slavery was just this thing that they're like, this is normal. Let's just sell people for profit. That brokenness doesn't mean that God's not involved still. Just because God gives you the dream doesn't mean it's going to go smoothly. And this is what I want us to remember. When the dream feels like a nightmare, remember this. God is still in the dream even when it feels like a nightmare. And listen, this year, who knows what's going to happen? But for some of us, maybe it'll feel like a nightmare. God has not left you in the middle of that. Maybe you wanted, certain things to happen and they're not happening. Doesn't mean God's just abandoning you and what God's calling you to do in your life. God is still in the dream, even when it feels like a nightmare. And we're going to see this all throughout the story of Joseph. Now, where we're landing today is very much a nightmare situation, but I'm going to give some foreshadowing a little bit. Joseph, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in Genesis, and if you ever want to go read this whole story on your own, it starts in Genesis 37. Go check that story out. It's insane. You can read ahead. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But Joseph is a Christ-like figure in the Bible. Joseph actually gives us a foreshadowing of Jesus because God is going to use Joseph to save people like he used Jesus to save all people. God is in the business of bringing dreams through the nightmare, and Jesus is the perfect example of that. Think of the nightmare that Jesus went through. He was despised and rejected by many, like Joseph was. Jesus was sold to be crucified like Joseph was sold into slavery. Jesus' life seemed like it was over at the cross, like Joseph's life right here feels like it's over. But God brought the dream to the nightmare through the resurrection. And he brought the dream to the nightmare like Joseph. But we'll get there. So go with us in this series together. This is one of those series like, hey, it's going to build off each other, where like if you miss a week, it's going to feel a little like, what just happened? I missed a chapter of the book. Like, that's not cool. Like, be a part of this. If you miss a Sunday, make sure you catch up online. Like, this is one of those series where each week's going to build off each other. So be a part of this with us. But what we need to understand first and foremost is we need to trust God when things don't go smoothly. When the dream feels like a nightmare, it doesn't mean God just abandoned us. It doesn't mean God's not with us. It doesn't mean God's not working, because in the midst of the nightmare, God is still orchestrating his dream for his kingdom. And And I think that God is giving us as individuals and giving us as church, as a church, dreams that are his. And it won't always be smooth to get there. And there'll be things in the way that make it feel like a nightmare, but God is with us all the time working. And one church is a testament to that. There was a time in 2018, I think I've told this story before, but I literally thought one church was done. Maybe you guys didn't know that because I didn't want to tell you yet. But I thought, we don't have the finances, we don't have the people, we don't have the core, we don't have the leadership. This thing is falling apart before we ever got off the ground. And I remember at that point, I had two options. One, I could freak out like crazy, which I did for a moment. Or I can say, you know what? If God is who God says he is, like he says all throughout Scripture, that he's faithful, that he works through the commotion and the nightmares and the storms, that he's the one that's not going to abandon us even in our darkest moments. If that's who he is, well, let's see if that's the case. Let's see. And whatever happens, happens, but I'm going to trust God that what he's going to do in the midst of this is going to be what he wants to get done. One church, I promise you, from that moment on, I have never worried about one church falling apart. Sure, things have been crazy. It's been nuts, buildings and COVID and all that craziness. But it's never been are we going to make it? Because God continually works even through nightmarish situations. He does that for us as a church, not just one church, but as a global church. And he does that individually as followers of him. So let's remember that as we kick off this series together this week. So I want to encourage us to stand up at this moment. We're going to pray. We're going to take communion together because, my goodness, you want to know how God works through a nightmare? We look at Jesus, like I just mentioned. So no matter what happens moving forward, maybe you're in the midst of a nightmare right now. Know that God is still in the midst of that with you. And maybe you had this dream that God's kind of laying in your heart hey, there's a chance to glorify him and love people. You're I don't know if I can pull off this dream. Good, because you're not the one that has to pull it off anyway. God does. So trust him in that. But ultimately, remember, the reminder that God works through the nightmares is Jesus through the cross and his resurrection. So let me pray. Let's take communion. We'll worship with one more song together. God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this church. Thank you for this people, God. But thank you for the story of Joseph. We just see how his dream quickly turned into a nightmare, God. And God, we can feel that sometimes. So God, I just pray, one, that we recognize the dreams that you're giving us, ones that are centered around you, that look to give you glory, look to point people to you. God, help us to recognize those dreams and look to live them out. God, help us not to get in the way of those dreams of other people. Help us to love those around us so we can encourage people and help them accomplish what you want to accomplish in their lives and our lives together as your body. But help us to remember that even in the midst of a nightmare, God, you are still there. Help us to remember that this story of Joseph is just a foreshadowing of what you ultimately do through Jesus. God, we thank you for that truth. In its name we pray. Amen. So together what we do, like we do every week as we gather, is we take the bread that represents the body that was broken for us. It seemed like a nightmare. It was God living out the dream. And together, we drink the juice that represents the blood that was shed for us, so we can be forgiven and restored back to God. And that truth is the reminder that even in the midst of nightmares, God is there, God is working. So let's hang on to that truth as we kick off this series today. Let's sing one more song as we close out our service.
I searched the world, I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of fate are never enough. And you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all. You still call me friend, 'cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, but nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Guys, thank you for joining us as we start our 2022. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. If you're new, we have 1 and 5 in the back, or we have the Connect card pinned at the top of the comments online. Have a fantastic week, guys. You are dismissed.